The disappearing hikers of Misty Peaks. Misty Peaks was a range of majestic mountains shrouded in mystery and surrounded by eerie legends. Among the stories that whispered through the nearby town was one that spoke of hikers who ventured into the peaks and never returned. Despite the warnings, a group of experienced backpackers set out on an overnight trip to conquer the peaks and debunk the tales once and for all. Equipped with state-of-the-art gear and an unshakable determination, they descended the mist-covered trails with a sense of excitement. The sun was beginning to set as they reached a plateau, revealing breathtaking views of the surrounding landscape. They set up camp, their tents forming small islands in a sea of fog. As the night descended, so did an unsettling chill that seeped into their bones. They gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and laughter, but a sense of unease lingered in the air. Strange rustlings echoed from the dense mist, and the flickering firelight cast eerie shadows that seemed to dance and twist. As the group settled into their tents to sleep, a low, haunting melody seemed to drift on the wind. At first, they dismissed it as a trick of the imagination, attributing it to the sounds of the wilderness. But the melody grew louder, its mournful notes weaving a hypnotic spell that tugged at their consciousness. Curiosity turned to apprehension, and they unzipped their tents to investigate. The fog was dense and disorienting, obscuring their surroundings and muffling their voices. The melody seemed to be coming from all directions, as if the very mountains were singing a mournful dirge. The hikers exchanged worried glances as they realized they were disoriented. The landscape around them had changed, and the trail they had followed had vanished. Panic gripped them as they tried to retrace their steps, but the mist seemed to shift and obscure their path, leading them in circles. Hours stretched into an eternity as they stumbled through the fog, their calls for help swallowed by the dense air. The haunting melody persisted, now accompanied by faint whispers that seemed to come from the very mist itself. Shadows danced on the edges of their vision, and they felt an oppressive weight pressing down on them. Exhausted and on the brink of despair, they stumbled upon an ancient, dilapidated cabin. Its windows were shattered, and the wood was weathered and warped. Desperation forced them inside, hoping for shelter and a respite from the relentless fog. The cabin's interior was as eerie as its exterior, old furniture covered in dust, cobwebs hanging in every corner. But what unnerved them the most was the sensation of being watched, as if the walls held secrets they could scarcely comprehend. The haunting melody and whispers persisted, growing louder within the confines of the cabin. In the dim light, they noticed faded photographs scattered on a dusty table. Photographs of hikers from decades past, their eyes haunted and their expressions filled with dread. As they studied the images, they realized they were not alone. The figures from the photographs seemed to materialize around them, their spectral forms moving in and out of the mist. Terrified, the hikers fled the cabin, their fear driving them to push through the fog with newfound determination. Miraculously, they eventually stumbled upon a trail marker, and as they followed it, the mist began to lift, revealing the landscape they had lost. They returned to the town, their faces pale and their voices trembling as they recounted their harrowing ordeal. The legends of the disappearing hikers were no longer dismissed as mere superstitions, and Misty Peaks became even more shrouded in enigma and fear. The hikers' story became a chilling warning to all who dared to venture into the peaks. The haunting melody and whispers that had entrapped them remained etched in their memories, a testament to the inexplicable and supernatural forces that lingered within the misty embrace of the mountains. The ghostly train journey. In a small picturesque village nestled in the hills, an old railway track snaked its way through the countryside, a relic of a bygone era. The track was no longer in use, the trains having stopped running decades ago. But one summer evening, a group of adventurous teenagers decided to embark on a journey along the abandoned railway line, seeking excitement and a taste of the past. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravado, they set off as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers, and the moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape. As they walked along the tracks, the rusted rails seemed to echo with the ghostly whispers of a time long past. As they ventured further, the temperature dropped noticeably and a dense fog began to roll in. Their flashlights barely pierced the veil, casting distorted shadows that seemed to dance and sway. They pushed forward, the distant sound of a train whistle echoing in the distance. At first, they dismissed it as their imagination, a trick of the mind brought on by the eerie surroundings. But the sound grew louder, the mournful wail of the whistle cutting through the stillness of the night. Panic began to bubble up within them as they realized the sound was coming from behind them. They spun around, their flashlights cutting through the fog, and what they saw froze them in their tracks. Emerging from the fog was a spectral train, its outline hazy and indistinct. It glided along the tracks without a sound, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light. The group stood in stunned silence, unable to tear their eyes away from the ethereal sight before them. As the train drew closer, they could see figures within the windows. Passengers dressed in outdated clothing, their faces worn and weary. The train's arrival seemed to defy all logic, a phantom from the past materializing in their present. The air grew colder, and their breaths fogged in front of them as they watched in awe and terror. With a final, mournful blast of its whistle, the ghostly train passed through them, its spectral form dissipating into the fog as quickly as it had appeared. The teenagers were left standing along the abandoned tracks, their hearts pounding and their minds reeling from the surreal encounter. They eventually gathered their wits and retreated from the railway line, stumbling back into the village with their hair-raising tale. No one quite believed their story, dismissing it as a trick of the imagination brought on by the combination of fog and moonlight. But the teenagers knew what they had seen, the ghostly train, a relic of the past, passing through the present in a fleeting moment of otherworldly beauty and chilling fear. The experience left an indelible mark on their memories, a reminder that the line between the living and the supernatural can sometimes blur in the most unexpected of ways. The mysterious fog of echoing pines. In the heart of a dense forest stood a cluster of towering trees known as echoing pines. The area was known for its tranquil beauty, but it also held a chilling secret. One group of friends decided to embark on an overnight camping trip within the forest, eager to experience its serenity firsthand. As they set up their campsite beneath the towering pines, the sun cast dappled shadows on the forest floor. The air was crisp and cool, and the sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls created a symphony of nature's harmony. They laughed and shared stories, feeling a sense of camaraderie as they built their campfire. As night descended, so did an unusual fog that seemed to roll in from all directions. At first, they dismissed it as a normal weather phenomenon, but the fog grew denser and more disorienting. Their flashlights struggled to penetrate the thick mist, and the forest's familiar landscape became shrouded in an otherworldly haze. The group huddled around the campfire, trying to ward off the unsettling cold that seemed to seep into their bones. The fog muffled their voices, creating an eerie silence broken only by the crackling of the fire. Unease settled over them, and they exchanged nervous glances as the pines loomed like spectral sentinels in the mist. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the fog, a faint, distant cry that seemed to come from all directions. They strained their ears, trying to make sense of the haunting noise. The cry turned into a whisper, the words unintelligible yet undeniable. Panic set in as they realized the whispers were addressing them directly, their names carried on the wind. Desperation drove them to pack up their belongings and attempt to leave echoing pines. But no matter which direction they walked, the fog seemed to shift and confuse their path. The trees themselves appeared to move, forming a labyrinth that led them back to their starting point each time. The whispers grew louder, their words forming eerie warnings and cryptic messages. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, taking on shapes that seemed to reach out to them. The temperature dropped even further, and the breaths fogged in front of them as they stumbled through the mist. Hours turned into an eternity as they became trapped within the fog's grasp. Exhausted and on the brink of despair, they collapsed onto the forest floor, their minds consumed by a chilling sense of hopelessness. The whispers seemed to meld with the mist, creating an otherworldly chorus that filled the air. Just as despair seemed to take hold, the fog began to lift, revealing the first rays of dawn. The forest around them looked familiar again, and the oppressive cold began to recede. With renewed determination, they managed to find their way out of echoing pines, stumbling back to their car in a daze. They left the forest with their hearts still pounding, the memory of the mysterious fog and the haunting whispers forever etched into their minds. The experience left them with a deep sense of unease, a reminder that nature's beauty can hold a dark and enigmatic underbelly. Echoing pines had become a place of both wonder and terror, a haunting reminder that the line between reality and the unknown can blur in the most unsettling of ways.